She wakes up and calls Malik's name before she remembers her own son's. A struggling black man stops to help a lost elderly woman on a freezing Detroit morning, something everyone else ignores. But just hours later, when the hospital doors burst open and her billionaire CEO son arrives, Malik Turner discovers that one small act of kindness can unleash a storm powerful enough to change the course of his entire life. The snow had started falling before sunrise, the kind of steady Michigan snow that softened the edges of everything and made Detroit look quieter than it really was. Malik Turner tugged his thin jacket tighter around his shoulders as he pedaled his beat-up delivery bike down Gratiot Avenue. His breath came out in clouds. His fingers stung through the cheap gloves he'd bought at a gas station 2 winters ago. But he kept going. He always kept going. Rent was late again, and every delivery meant a few more dollars toward keeping the lights on for his little sister. Most mornings, the city barely noticed him. He'd learned how to blend in, how to make himself small, how to stay out of the way. People saw the bike before they saw the man, and when they finally noticed him, his dark skin, his tired clothes, their eyes slid off him like he was a smudge on the window. He'd grown used to it, but some days it cut deeper than others. He turned onto a quieter street, heading toward a corner store where his next drop-off waited. That's when he saw her. An elderly woman stood alone at the bus stop, her coat too thin, her gray hair whipping in the wind. Snow clung to her shoulders as if she'd been standing there far too long. She wasn't looking at the road or a schedule or even her phone. She looked lost, so lost it made Malik slow down without even thinking. She held a small leather purse against her chest and kept glancing around like she wasn't sure what world she'd woken up in. People passed her without stopping. A man in a suit stepped around her as though she were a trash can left too close to the curb. A woman clutching a coffee pulled her scarf tighter and hurried away. Even the security guard from the nearby bank stepped outside, glanced at the old woman, then went back in without a second thought. Snow gathered on her shoulders like no one in the world had thought to brush it away. Malik coasted to a stop, planting one foot on the ground. He watched her a moment, long enough to be sure she was truly alone. Something in her trembling hands, in the way her eyes watered from more than just the cold, made his chest tighten. "Ma'am?" he called softly, stepping off the bike. "You okay out here? Do you need help?" She didn't answer right away. She just blinked up at him, her eyes pale blue and full of confusion. The wind pushed a strand of silver hair across her cheek, and she shivered so hard her purse slipped slightly from her grasp. I'm not sure," she whispered. I don't know where I'm supposed to be." Malik felt the weight of her words settle into him. She wasn't just cold. She was scared, disoriented, alone. He took one cautious step closer, raising his hands in a gentle gesture to show he meant no harm. "It's all right," he said, voice low and steady. "I'm Malik. Can I call someone for you? Do you know your name?" She frowned like she was reaching into a room that had gone dark. Then, barely audible, she said, I think it's Evelyn. Only Evelyn. No last name. No address. Just a name floating in the cold." Behind him, someone muttered, "Of course it's him bothering her," as they walked by. Another shook his head like Malik was up to something. A security guard across the street watched him with narrowing eyes. For a moment, the shame came back, the familiar sting of being seen as a problem before being seen as a person. Malik swallowed hard and kept his attention on Evelyn. "Miss Evelyn," he said softly, "you look freezing. There's a diner right there. Let me get you someplace warm, okay? We'll figure everything out." Her lips trembled. She hesitated only a second before nodding, as though something in his voice reached her through the fog. He offered her his arm. She gripped it with surprising strength, leaning on him as they walked through the swirling snow toward the warm yellow lights of the diner. His bike clattered as he rolled it beside them. As the door closed behind them, shutting out the cold, Malik felt a strange shift in the air, something he couldn't name yet. A quiet sense that this moment, this choice to stop, had nudged his life onto a path he had never planned for. He didn't know that within hours, the world would look at him very differently. He didn't know that this trembling woman, lost in the snow, was at the center of a life he'd never imagined touching. He didn't know that someone powerful was already looking for her. All he knew was this: he couldn't leave her out there alone. Not today. Not ever. And as Evelyn sank into the booth, still clinging to his arm, Malik felt the faint tremble of a future shifting beneath his feet. Quiet. Unstoppable. Already on its way. The diner wasn't much. Just a narrow place squeezed between a pawn shop and a boarded-up deli. But compared to the freezing street outside, it felt almost heavenly. A hiss of bacon on the grill. The glow of old pendant lamps hanging low. The faint smell of coffee that had probably been sitting since dawn. Snow melted from Malik's jacket and pooled at his feet, but no one seemed to care enough to mop it. Evelyn sat stiffly, her gloved hands wrapped around each other, like she feared they'd float away if she let go. Her eyes darted across the room. Neon signs, cracked vinyl seats, couples murmuring over breakfast, like none of it was familiar to her. "Here," Malik murmured, easing her purse onto the table. "Just take a breath. It's warm in here." She nodded, though the trembling in her chin didn't stop. I didn't mean to cause trouble." "You didn't," he said gently. "You're all right now." The waitress, a woman in her early 50s with tired eyes and a ponytail that sagged to one side, approached with a look Malik knew too well, polite on the surface, wary underneath. "You two need menus?" she asked, but her gaze lingered on Malik's worn jacket, the snow melting off his shoes, the delivery bag slung across his shoulder. "Just something hot for her," Malik said quickly. He reached into his pocket, fingers brushing the last of his crumpled tips. "Soup, maybe?" The waitress raised an eyebrow. "You covering it?" Malik nodded. Even that small gesture stung more than it should have. She scribbled on her pad and walked away, casting one last glance at Evelyn like she was a fragile vase someone had left on the edge of a counter. Evelyn traced the rim of the water glass in front of her. "I don't remember this place," she whispered. "Did I come here often? It feels like I should know." "Maybe you live nearby," Malik offered. "You got a phone on you? Maybe we can call someone." She opened her purse with trembling hands. Inside were tissues, an old lipstick, a leather wallet, and a cell phone with a dead battery. "It was charged this morning," she said, blinking in confusion. "I think." Malik plugged his own phone into the wall outlet behind the booth and used his spare cable to connect hers. As soon as the screen lit up, Evelyn gasped softly, as if seeing a piece of herself return. But the lock screen held nothing helpful, just a background photo of a lake at sunset. "No emergency contacts?" Malik asked. She stared, tilting her head slightly. "I know this place," she murmured, touching the image. but I don't remember why. Her voice cracked. Malik felt something inside him shift. He'd seen people lost before. Lost to addiction. Lost to poverty. Lost to hopelessness. But this was different. This was a woman whose whole life was slipping through her fingers like thin sand, and she didn't even understand why. The waitress returned with the soup, steam rising, the scent of chicken broth filling the space between them. Malik slid it toward Evelyn, but before she could take a sip, her hand began trembling violently. The spoon clattered against the bowl. "Take your time," Malik said quickly. She didn't seem to hear him. Her breath came in shallow bursts. Her eyes darted again, searching the air as if her memories might be floating just beyond reach. "It's like someone took pieces of my mind," she whispered, "and scattered them." Malik leaned forward. "You're not alone. I'm right here. We'll figure it out." But the reassurance barely had time to settle. Evelyn's face drained of color. Her fingers slipped from the spoon entirely. The bowl rattled as her hand hit the edge of the table. "Miss Evelyn?" he said sharply. She blinked once, slow, unfocused, then swayed. The waitress gasped. A spoon hit the floor. A man at the counter muttered, "I knew that guy was trouble." Malik stood just as Evelyn slumped sideways. He caught her before she hit the floor, her small frame folding against him like a collapsing paper lantern. "Call 911!" he shouted. But instead of rushing to help, half the diner stared at him as though he'd caused this, like the simple fact of him being here meant guilt. "What did you do to her?" a man demanded from across the room. "I didn't do anything. She needs help." But the accusation lingered in the air like smoke, thick and poisonous. The waitress finally grabbed the phone behind the counter, stumbling over her words as she told the dispatcher what was happening. Malik lowered Evelyn carefully onto the floor, his knees hitting the cold tile. "Stay with me," he whispered urgently. "Evelyn, can you hear me?" Her eyes fluttered but didn't open. A soft, broken sound escaped her lips. Malik felt his own pulse racing. He placed a trembling hand against her cheek. "Hold on. They're coming." Outside, sirens began to echo faintly through the snowy streets. Inside, every eye was locked on him. Some worried, some suspicious, some cold and judging. The kind of stares he'd fought against his whole life. He swallowed hard, ignoring them all, focusing only on the frail woman before him. Snow melt soaked into the knees of his jeans. His breath shook, but he didn't move. He refused to leave her. Not for anything. Not for anyone. When the paramedics burst in moments later, their boots scattering slush across the floor, Malik stood and backed away just enough for them to reach her, but not far enough to abandon her. The lead EMT glanced between Malik and Evelyn. "You with her?" Malik opened his mouth, but he didn't know the answer. Not really. "I'm the one who helped her," he said finally. "I couldn't just walk away." The EMT nodded, but the suspicion in his eyes was unmistakable. As they lifted Evelyn onto the stretcher, Malik felt something go cold inside him, colder than the snow outside, because deep down, he sensed it. This wasn't the end of his involvement. It was the beginning. And whatever was coming next was bigger than either of them understood. The ambulance doors slammed shut with a thud that echoed in Malik's chest. Snow drifted through the air in soft white spirals as the paramedics climbed inside, shouting medical terms he didn't understand. One of them leaned out before the doors fully closed. "You riding with us?" Malik hesitated. This wasn't his family. This wasn't even someone he knew. He had a delivery route half finished, a paycheck depending on it, an apartment where his little sister waited for dinner he wasn't sure he could afford. But when he looked through the gap in the doors and saw Evelyn lying there, still as snow, a thin oxygen mask over her mouth, his feet moved before his mind did. "Yeah," he said. "I'm coming." The EMT nodded. The doors closed. The sirens rose, cutting through the cold silence of the street. Inside, the ambulance smelled of antiseptic and something metallic he couldn't name. The lights flickered softly overhead as they sped toward the hospital. Malik sat on a small bench, gripping the rail beside him so tightly, his knuckles ached. He kept his eyes on Evelyn, watching the rise and fall of her chest, shallow and unsure. "Her blood pressure's bottoming out," one EMT muttered. "Possible syncope. Could be cardiac." "Any family?" the other asked. Malik opened his mouth, ready to explain that he didn't know anything. Her last name, her address, the city she lived in. And somehow he felt guilty for that. As if he should have known more. As if caring for her should have required an entire history first. "I found her at a bus stop," he said quietly. "She was lost." The EMT studied him for a moment, eyes sharp but not unkind. Malik had seen that look before, the kind people gave when they were trying to decide if they should trust him. "You did the right thing calling for help," the EMT said. "A lot of folks wouldn't have bothered." Malik wasn't one for compliments, but something in the man's voice steadied him. When they arrived at Detroit Mercy Hospital, doors flew open and Evelyn was rolled out into a tunnel of white lights, shouting voices, cold air rushing in from the automatic doors. Malik followed because stopping felt impossible. Every step felt heavy, but his legs didn't let him quit. Inside, the hospital swallowed him whole. Bright linoleum floors, the faint hum of machines, muffled announcements overhead. The world smelled of bleach and tired hope. The paramedics pushed Evelyn through double doors that clicked shut behind them, leaving Malik on the other side with nothing but the fading echo of wheels grinding against tile. He stood there for a few seconds, unsure what to do with his hands, with his breath, with himself. "Sir, are you with the patient?" a nurse asked, flipping through a clipboard. I guess so," he said. "I brought her in." "Family?" "No." The word tasted sharper than he expected. "But she needed help." The nurse nodded, jotting something down. "Take a seat in the waiting area. A doctor will update you." The waiting area was a row of plastic chairs that had lost their shine years ago. Malik sat, elbows on his knees, fingers knitted together. His clothes were still damp, cold from the snow. He could feel people looking at him, curious, suspicious, assuming things they didn't know. A woman across the room pulled her purse closer, her eyes flicking to him before darting away. A man whispered something to his wife, both glancing over as if he didn't belong. Malik lowered his head. He'd felt invisible his whole life. But moments like this, moments when the world made it clear they'd already decided who he was, those were the ones that stung the deepest. He closed his eyes, trying to steady his breath. "Don't lose it," he told himself. "Stay here. She needs someone. You can't leave her alone." Minutes passed, then an hour, then another. The clock on the wall ticked loud enough to scrape at his nerves. His phone buzzed, 2 missed calls from his sister. He texted her quickly, telling her he'd be late. Everything was fine. He didn't add that he had no idea what fine meant right now. Just when he thought the silence might crush him, the doors to the treatment hall swung open. A doctor stepped out, glancing around the room. Family of Evelyn Brooks? No one stood. Malik rose slowly. "I'm not family," he said, "but I brought her in." The doctor looked him over, eyes tired but somewhat relieved. She stabilized, thanks to fast response. If she'd arrived 20 minutes later, he shook his head. "Well, you did the right thing." Relief flooded Malik so fast his knees nearly buckled. "Can I see her?" "In a moment," the doctor said. "But there's something you should know." Before he could finish, a sharp voice cut through the waiting room. "Where is she?" The air shifted, heads turned. 3 men in suits stormed in, trailed by another man with a tablet and 2 security personnel. They looked out of place in the worn hospital hall, shoulders broad, shoes polished, expressions carved from stone. The man in front was tall, early 40s, with a jaw hardened by stress and eyes that burned with urgency. "I'm looking for my mother," he snapped. "Evelyn Brooks. Who is in charge here?" The doctor straightened. "Sir, she's stable, but she—" The man cut him off, turning sharply toward Malik, because Malik was the only one standing, and that was enough for suspicion to ignite. "Who are you?" the man demanded. Malik opened his mouth, but nothing came out. The man took 1 step closer, fury simmering just beneath the surface. "What did you do to my mother?" Malik's breath caught. He'd been judged before. He'd been assumed guilty before. But this time, the weight behind the accusation felt different. Heavier, sharper, carrying consequences he couldn't yet see. And in that moment, Malik knew. The night wasn't over. The storm wasn't done. This was only the first strike of something much bigger, and it was heading straight toward him. The tall man closed the distance between them with the certainty of someone who was used to having answers handed to him the moment he demanded them. His expensive coat still dusted with snow, his dark hair slicked back with the precision of a CEO walking into a board meeting, not a hospital hallway. The 2 security men flanking him scanned Malik up and down as if measuring threat in every inch of him. Malik lifted his hands slightly, not in surrender, but in a silent plea for calm. "Sir, I didn't do anything to her. I found her outside. She was cold and confused. I brought her here." The man's jaw tightened. "You expect me to believe that? That you just happened to be there?" The doctor stepped in quickly, sensing the confrontation rising like heat off asphalt. "Mr. Brooks, please. This young man saved your mother's life. Her vitals were dropping fast. If he hadn't gotten her here when he did—" Mr. Brooks froze. The words seemed to hit him in a place he didn't let many people see. "Saved her life?" he repeated, softer now, but still wary. The doctor nodded. "Yes, sir." For a moment something shifted in the CEO's eyes. Fear, guilt, something unspoken. But it shuddered quickly as he turned back to Malik. "You," he said, voice quieter but sharper, "come with me." Malik's stomach dropped. "I didn't. Now." It wasn't a request. Security stepped forward, not touching him, but making sure he knew that refusing wasn't an option. The doctor tried to interject again, but Mr. Brooks held up a hand, stopping him cold. They moved down a corridor, lit by sterile lights that hummed overhead. Malik's shoes squeaked on the polished floor, each step echoing louder than it should have. They turned into a small consultation room, windowless, quiet, a place where hospitals delivered hard news. The door closed. The tension thickened. Mr. Brooks stood opposite him, arms crossed. "Start talking." Malik's breath steadied. He'd been judged for things he didn't do his whole life. This wasn't new, but it stung anyway, because he'd done nothing but help. "I was making deliveries," he began, "and I saw her standing alone at the bus stop. She looked lost, freezing. People were walking past her like she wasn't even there." Mr. Brooks frowned, but didn't interrupt. "She said her name was Evelyn," Malik continued. "She didn't know where she was or where she was supposed to be. I took her to a diner so she could warm up. Then she passed out. I called 911. I rode here with her." Silence stretched between them. Finally, Mr. Brooks exhaled slowly, pacing once before stopping in front of Malik. "My mother has memory issues," he admitted quietly. "Some days she's fine. Other days," he swallowed hard, "she wanders. She gets confused. We've been looking for her since this morning." So that explained the suits, the entourage, the urgency. But the hostility? Malik didn't understand that part. "If I hadn't found her," Malik said softly. Mr. Brooks met his eyes then, really met them, something grounding in the moment. But before either man could say more, the door opened and a nurse stepped in. "Mr. Brooks, your mother is asking for someone." He straightened. "Me?" The nurse shook her head. "Actually, she's asking for him." She nodded toward Malik. Mr. Brooks blinked, stunned. The security guards shifted awkwardly. Malik felt his heart catch. "Why would she ask for him?" one guard muttered under his breath. But the nurse didn't waver. "She wants the man from the diner," her words. The CEO looked at Malik again, this time with something new flickering behind the steel in his gaze. Confusion. Maybe even envy. "Fine," he said, stepping aside. "Let's go see her." They walked down the hallway together, neither speaking. The hum of machines, the muted footsteps of nurses, the distant beeping of monitors. All of it seemed louder now. When they reached Evelyn's room, the door was half open. Warm light spilled out into the hall. Malik paused at the threshold, suddenly aware of how out of place he looked. His jacket still damp, his delivery bag slung over his shoulder, his hands cracked from the cold. He'd never belonged in rooms like this. Places where powerful men stood in tailored suits, where decisions were made quietly but carried heavy consequences. But Evelyn lifted her head at the sound of his footsteps, and her entire face softened. "There you are," she whispered, her voice frail but full of recognition. "My kind young man." Malik stepped closer. Mr. Brooks stayed behind him, frozen. "I told you I wouldn't leave you," Malik said gently. She reached for his hand with thin fingers that trembled less than before. "You didn't. Thank you." Then she looked past him to her son. But her expression changed. Not anger, not fear, but something heavier, something sadder. "Oh, Daniel," she murmured. "You came." Her tone made Daniel flinch. It was the kind of tone that held years inside it, of distance, of misunderstandings, of moments missed. Malik felt himself shrinking back, wanting to give them space, but Evelyn held his hand tighter. "Don't go," she whispered. Daniel exhaled shakily, running a hand through his hair. "Mother, please. You shouldn't be getting upset." "I'm not upset," she said softly. "I'm grateful." She turned her gaze back to Malik. "He treated me like someone who mattered, Daniel. someone worth stopping for. The words hung between them like a stone suspended in the air. Daniel's throat worked, but no sound came out. And then, almost too faint to hear, Evelyn whispered Malik closer. He bent down, hearing her breath warm against his ear. "Don't leave me yet," she murmured. "Stay. I feel safer when you're here." Malik nodded slowly, but behind him something cracked in Daniel's expression, something between hurt and realization. And beneath that crack, something darker stirred. This wasn't over, not even close, and Malik could feel it rising like a second storm on the horizon. The room felt too bright, too quiet, too small for the three of them. Evelyn lying pale against the sheets, Malik standing by her side like an anchor she clung to, and Daniel frozen near the door, his expression shifting between guilt and disbelief. Snow tapped gently against the window, a soft reminder of the world outside, but the air inside felt thick, tense, waiting. Evelyn's hand loosened in Malik's just slightly, exhaustion drawing her eyelids lower. The nurse stepped in, checking monitors. "She needs rest," she whispered. "You can stay, but keep it calm." Daniel nodded stiffly. Malik stepped back a little as Evelyn drifted into sleep, though she didn't release his fingers until the very last moment. When her eyes finally closed, the nurse dimmed the lights and slipped out, leaving Malik and Daniel alone in the muted glow of the monitor screens. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Daniel cleared his throat. "Sit," he said, but the word came out more like a command than an invitation. Malik remained standing. He wasn't sure whether it was stubbornness, nerves, or plain instinct, but sitting felt too vulnerable, and Daniel looked like the kind of man who turned vulnerability into leverage. Daniel tried again, softer this time. "Please." Malik hesitated, then slowly took the chair near the foot of the bed. Daniel remained standing, one hand gripping the railing of his mother's bed, knuckles white. Up close, he didn't look like the cold executive who had stormed into the hospital earlier. He looked tired, like he'd been carrying something far heavier than a company name. "You said you found her at a bus stop," Daniel began, eyes fixed on the sheets. "Was she scared?" Malik nodded. "Yeah, real scared. She didn't know where she was. She didn't know her own phone code. I don't think she even knew how long she'd been out in the cold." Daniel's throat tightened. "She does this sometimes, wanders. The doctors, they've warned me." He rubbed a hand over his face. "I thought we had people watching her. I thought—" The words cracked before they finished. Malik didn't know what to say. Daniel Brooks was a stranger, wealthy, powerful, polished, but beneath all that he was also a son standing at the edge of fear. Malik had met that version of people before, usually right after a tragedy broke them open. "You got here fast," Malik offered quietly. Daniel laughed once, hollow. "I should have been here before it came to this." Silence settled again. Only the rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor kept time. Then Daniel straightened and looked directly at Malik for the first time since entering the room. Really looked. Not past him. Not through him. At him. "You were with her," he said. "You helped her when no one else did." Malik shrugged a little. Anyone would have done the same. "No," Daniel said sharply. "They wouldn't have, I know that much." Their eyes held for a beat, an unspoken acknowledgement of the truth, that Malik had stepped in where most people stepped away. Daniel cleared his throat, regaining the composure of a man who usually controlled every room he walked into. "Look," he said, gesturing for Malik to follow him into the hallway. "I need to understand something. Come on." Reluctantly, Malik rose and followed. They exited into the corridor, leaving Evelyn resting behind them. The hallway lights hummed overhead, casting long shadow across the sterile floor. Nurses wheeled carts past. Footsteps echoed faintly from distant rooms. The hospital felt like a maze of grief and hope tangled together. Daniel stopped near a corner, leaning against the wall. "Tell me everything," he said. "How you found her, what she said, what you saw." Malik told him, slowly, carefully, about the bus stop, the snow, her confusion, her trembling hands, how she'd looked straight through people as if searching for something she couldn't name, how she'd trusted him without hesitation when he offered warmth. Daniel listened without interrupting once, though his jaw tightened with every detail. When Malik finished, Daniel exhaled long and heavy, like he'd been holding his breath for hours. "She was alone out there," he murmured. "My mother. Alone on a freezing street." Malik softened slightly. "She wasn't alone when I saw her." That made Daniel pause. Something inside him, some hardened layer, shifted. He pushed off the wall, pacing. "I owe you something, for helping her." "You don't owe me anything," Malik said immediately. "I didn't do it for that." Daniel stopped pacing. "Everyone wants something." "Not me." Daniel studied him. His eyes were sharp, analytical, the eyes of a man trained to read motives for a living. But for once he found nothing to read. And maybe that unsettled him more than a lie would have. Before Daniel could speak again, the sound of hurried footsteps filled the corridor. A security guard, one of Daniel's, approached quickly, handing the CEO a tablet. "Sir, we found the street camera footage you asked about," the guard said, "from the area where your mother was reported missing." Malik stiffened. Daniel caught the reaction and raised a hand to signal the guard to wait. He looked at Malik. "Relax. It's procedure." Malik didn't relax. People like him didn't get the luxury of relaxing around men with authority. Daniel tapped the screen. Footage played. Grainy, gray-toned, showing Evelyn wandering the sidewalk alone, cars passing her by. Then another angle. Malik approaching carefully, speaking to her, supporting her arm as they walked toward the diner. No aggression. No suspicious movements. Just kindness. Daniel watched the clip twice, then handed the tablet back without a word. When he turned to Malik again, something in his expression had changed, subtly, but undeniably. "You really were trying to help her," Daniel said quietly. Malik met his gaze, unflinching. "That's what I told you." Daniel nodded once, slowly. "Fair enough." A soft chime sounded overhead, a hospital announcement Malik didn't catch. A nurse walked by carrying a tray of medication. The world felt a little quieter around them, a little more level. "So," Daniel said, folding his arms, "where do we go from here?" Malik blinked. "What do you mean?" Daniel looked back toward the room where Evelyn slept. "She asked for you, not me. She trusts you. For now, I need that. She needs that." Malik's chest tightened. "What are you asking?" "I'm asking," Daniel said, voice dropping to something almost vulnerable, "that you stay, at least until she's stronger." Malik hesitated. He thought of his sister waiting at home, the half-finished deliveries, the rent slipping into red. But then he thought of Evelyn's trembling hand in his, her quiet plea, "Don't leave me." He nodded slowly. "I'll stay." Daniel released a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. "Thank you." He started back toward Evelyn's room. Malik followed. But just before they reached the door, Daniel paused again. "One last thing," he said. "If you ever need anything, anything at all, you come to me." Malik offered a faint, tired smile. "I don't need anything." Daniel's eyes narrowed, not with suspicion this time, but with disbelief that someone could mean that. He didn't reply, he simply pushed the door open and stepped inside. As Malik followed, he felt a shift in the air again. Not the trembling of uncertainty from earlier. Something else. Something heavier. Something that felt like the future leaning closer. And for the first time, Malik wondered if helping Evelyn was only the smallest part of the story unfolding around him. The hospital room was dim, lit only by a lamp that cast a soft, golden pool across the floor. Evelyn slept quietly, her breathing steadier now, but still fragile enough to make Malik hover near her bedside with a protective instinct he didn't fully understand. Daniel stood on the opposite side of the bed, hands tucked into his pockets, staring at his mother with an expression Malik couldn't read, somewhere between tenderness and regret. For a few minutes, neither man spoke. The only sound was the steady beeping of the heart monitor, the slow exhale of the heating vent, the muffled PA announcements drifting down the hallway. Malik shifted his weight, unsure if he should break the silence. Then Evelyn stirred. Her eyelids fluttered open, slow and heavy like curtains pulling apart after a long winter. She looked first at Daniel, her son, her eyes warming, then cooling just slightly, like she wasn't sure how much trust to offer him. Then she turned to Malik, and her entire face softened. "You're still here," she whispered. Malik nodded. "I told you I'd stay." Daniel swallowed hard, stepping forward. "Mother, I'm here too. I came as soon as—" Evelyn's frail hand lifted slightly, stopping him with the gentlest motion possible. "I know you came," she said. But he stayed. Daniel's face tightened, as if those words were stitched straight into an old wound. Malik felt like an intruder again, but Evelyn reached for his wrist with surprising strength, and the moment he tried to pull back, she held on tighter. "Come closer," she murmured to him. He bent toward her, careful not to disturb the tubes threaded beneath the blanket or the wires taped to her chest. Her breath brushed warm against his ear. "Thank you," she whispered. "You were kind when no one else even looked at me." Malik's throat tightened. "Anyone would have—" "No," she cut in, voice thin but sure. "Not anyone. You saw me. You cared. You treated me like my husband used to." The words made Daniel's head jerk slightly, as if she had spoken a secret he wasn't meant to hear. Malik didn't fully understand the weight of it, but he felt the emotion behind it. Something deep and aching. A memory Evelyn clung to. She leaned closer, voice trembling. "My husband. He used to take my hand the same way you did. Gentle. Steady, like I mattered." Malik was stunned into silence. "And Malik?" she whispered, as if sharing something sacred. "You reminded me of who I used to be, before the forgetting started." He didn't breathe for a moment. Then she said something softer still, something almost too quiet for him to capture. "Stay with me, just a little longer. I feel safe when you're here." Malik blinked hard, trying to steady the swell of emotions rising inside him. He wasn't used to being needed like this, much less by someone he'd met only hours ago. But before he could answer, Daniel stepped forward. "Mother," he said, a flicker of pain in his voice. "I'm here too. You can feel safe with me." Evelyn's eyes glistened with sorrow. Not accusation, not disappointment, but a sadness born of years slipping away unnoticed. "I know," she whispered. "But you're always so far away, Daniel. Even when you're standing beside me." The sentence hit the room like a quiet explosion. Daniel closed his eyes, jaw tightening, breath shaking. For all his wealth and power, in that second, he looked like a boy who had lost something he didn't know how to get back. Malik felt the tension thicken, and he gently loosened his wrist from Evelyn's hand. "I'll step out," Malik murmured. "Let you two—" "No," Evelyn said sharply, sharper than anyone expected. "Stay." Daniel opened his eyes at the firmness in her voice. "Mother," she cut him off softly. "I want to tell him something." Malik froze. Daniel stiffened. The room seemed to tilt. Evelyn motioned for Malik again. He leaned closer, unsure whether he was ready for whatever she was about to say. Her eyes, though clouded, were clear enough to hold intention. "Don't let him push you away," she whispered. "He has a good heart, but he forgets. He forgets what matters." Malik blinked. "I don't—" But she wasn't finished. "And Malik—" Her fingers brushed his wrist one last time. "You came into my life for a reason. Don't doubt that." When she leaned back into her pillow, her breath evened out, and her eyes fluttered shut again. The room fell into a silence thicker than before. Daniel stared at Malik as if trying to decipher a riddle, or a threat, or a truth he wasn't ready to accept. "What did she say to you?" he asked, voice low. Malik hesitated. "She just thanked me." Daniel's eyes narrowed. He didn't believe him. But before he could press further, the nurse returned to check Evelyn's vitals, breaking the moment. Daniel stepped out of the room abruptly, muttering something to his security detail. Malik stayed where he was, unsure whether he had been dismissed or spared. When Daniel finally returned, he didn't look at Malik. He ran a hand over his face, exhaling long and slow. "We're not done talking," he said quietly. Malik nodded. "Okay." Daniel glanced at his sleeping mother, his expression softening for a heartbeat. "She trusted you instantly. I haven't seen her do that in years." Malik didn't know what to say, so he said nothing. Daniel straightened, adjusting his suit jacket. "I need to understand why." And with that, he walked out of the room, leaving Malik alone with the echo of Evelyn's whispered words. The storm Malik had sensed earlier didn't feel far away anymore. It felt like it had already arrived, and he was standing directly beneath its center. The hallway outside Evelyn's room stretched long and empty, humming with fluorescent lights and the faint echo of wheels rolling somewhere distant. Malik leaned against the wall, letting the cold from the plaster seep into his jacket. His mind felt like it was running laps he couldn't control. Evelyn's whispered words, Daniel's sharp stare, the way fate had shoved him into a world that didn't belong to him. He didn't know how long he stood there before he heard the footsteps. Slow, heavy, purposeful, Daniel Brooks reappeared at the far end of the hall, his silhouette framed by the glow of the exit sign behind him. He wasn't alone this time. A younger man in a neat navy suit walked at his side, carrying a slim laptop case and wearing the kind of expression that said he'd been trained to see threats before anything else. When they reached Malik, Daniel stopped short, studying him again, this time with a chilling precision, as though memorizing details he hadn't bothered to notice before. "This is Ben Foster," Daniel said, "my assistant." Ben nodded politely, though his eyes skimmed Malik from boots to collar like scanning barcodes for counterfeit. "We need to ask you a few questions," Daniel said, gesturing toward a small family waiting room nearby. Malik stiffened. "About what?" "About today," Daniel said. "About how you found her. About you." "About me?" Malik's shoulders tensed. "Why? I already told you what happened." "That isn't enough," Ben said gently, but with a tone that left no room for argument. "We need to verify details, confirm your account." Malik felt heat rising in his chest. Not anger exactly, but something raw, the sting of being doubted simply because of who he was. Again. But he followed them inside. The room was tiny, with mismatched chairs, a water cooler humming in the corner, and posters about heart health peeling at the edges. Daniel took the seat opposite Malik while Ben opened the laptop with a soft click. "Let's start with your name," Ben said. "You already know it," Malik replied. "We need you to say it." He exhaled slowly. "Malik Turner." "Address?" Malik gave it. The moment the zip code left his mouth, something flickered in Ben's expression. Recognition. Not flattering recognition. The kind that came when you heard a neighborhood with more abandoned homes than working streetlights. "And your employment?" "I'm between jobs," Malik said. "Doing delivery runs for cash, trying to—" "So you are unemployed," Daniel cut in. "I said between jobs." Daniel leaned back, steepling his fingers. "Why were you fired from your last job?" The question struck Malik like a slap. He stared at Daniel, stunned, then at Ben, who typed silently, waiting for truth that could be twisted. "That's none of your business," Malik said quietly. "It is," Daniel countered, "if you were involved with my mother today." Something in Malik snapped, quietly, but undeniably. He rose halfway from his seat before catching himself. "I didn't lay a hand on her except to help her," Malik said. "I didn't hurt her. I didn't take anything from her. I didn't want anything from her. I just helped an old woman who needed help. That's all." His voice wasn't loud, but it was firm, solid, like a weight dropped into the room. Ben sat back, surprised. Daniel's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes did. A tiny fracture. The first faint crack in the shell of a man who didn't trust easily. "Sit," Daniel said quietly. Malik lowered himself, but didn't look away. After a long pause, Daniel said, "We looked into your background." Of course they had. Men like Daniel always did. "You've had setbacks," Daniel continued. "Losses, hard luck, troubled neighborhoods, a termination for workplace conflict." "It wasn't a conflict," Malik said, jaw tightening. "A coworker was being pushed around. I stood up for him. They let me go so they wouldn't have to deal with it." "So you were defending someone?" Ben asked, eyebrows raised. "Yes," Malik said simply. Daniel exchanged a glance with Ben, one Malik couldn't read. "Why?" Daniel said finally. "Why do you keep doing that?" "What?" "Helping people who can't help you back." Malik blinked. It wasn't an insult. It wasn't even a challenge. It was a genuine question from a man who did not understand the concept. So Malik told the truth. "Because somebody helped me once," Malik said. "When I was a kid. When no one else did. So now I help people. Even when no one believes me. Even when it costs me." Silence swept the room. Then the door opened. A nurse stepped in, breathless. "Mr. Brooks? Your mother is awake again. She's asking for—" Her gaze shifted to Malik. "Him," she finished. Daniel's face froze. Not angry, not offended, but stunned. His mother was asking for Malik again. He exhaled slowly, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "Fine, let's go." But as they stepped into the hallway, Daniel touched Malik's arm lightly, not forceful, not threatening, just human. "Whatever she said to you earlier," Daniel murmured, "I need to know. She hasn't spoken like that to anyone in months." Malik met his eyes. "She said I made her feel safe." Daniel swallowed hard. The words hit somewhere deep. "And she said you forget what matters." That landed heavier, so heavy that Daniel stopped in the hall. A beat passed. 2. Malik kept walking. When he reached Evelyn's room, she looked up with a smile that lit her tired features, warmth blooming despite the tubes and monitors. "There you are," she breathed. "My Malik." In the doorway, Daniel froze, those two words striking him like an earthquake. His mother didn't say, "My son." She said, "My Malik." And in that moment, jealousy and grief tangled in his chest like barbed wire. But beneath that pain, a seed of realization buried itself deep. Because for the first time, Daniel Brooks understood. This stranger, this man he questioned and doubted and judged, had reached his mother's heart in a way he hadn't been able to in years. And nothing about the night was going to be simple anymore. Evelyn wouldn't let go of Malik's hand. Her fingers were cold, delicate, but the grip itself had surprising strength, like she was holding on to the only thing anchoring her in a world that had begun slipping away. Malik sat at the edge of her bed, not wanting to crowd her, not wanting to intrude on whatever fragile peace she'd found by seeing him again. Daniel stood near the foot of the bed, arms folded, shoulders rigid. He didn't speak. He didn't have to. The tension rolled off him in quiet, rhythmic waves, like a heartbeat made of resentment. Evelyn turned her head toward her son. "Come closer," she whispered. Daniel stepped forward. The overhead light softened his sharp features as he leaned in. "I'm here, Mother." She blinked slowly, her eyes searching his face. "You look tired," she murmured. "You always look tired." Daniel's jaw tensed. "I've been worried." A faint smile touched her lips. "You worry about everything but the things that matter." Malik watched Daniel absorb those words, every syllable hitting its mark. Daniel looked away. Evelyn's hand trembled. "Both of you, sit. Please." Malik glanced toward Daniel, offering the chair nearest the bed. Daniel hesitated, then took it, but the gesture didn't soften the distance between them. Malik stepped back to give them space, but Evelyn's fingers found his wrist again. "Stay," she whispered. Daniel's eyes hardened just slightly, not with anger, but with the sting of being unnecessary. The nurse returned briefly to adjust Evelyn's IV line. Evelyn winced, then relaxed again. The room dimmed as the nurse lowered the lights, leaving only the soft glow of the bedside lamp. Miss Evelyn, Malik said quietly, you should rest. I will, she whispered. But first, I need to say something. Malik leaned closer, expecting a memory, or maybe a gentle story of her husband again. But instead, she looked at Daniel. I wasn't alone today, she said. I wasn't abandoned. Someone cared enough to stop. Daniel's expression bent a little. Mother, I didn't abandon you. No, she said gently. But you forget to see me. You forget I'm still here. I'm not a company. I'm not one of your ventures. I'm your mother. The words were soft, but they struck harder than any anger could have. She turned to Malik. And you didn't ask me for anything. Not even my name. You only asked if I was all right. Her voice shook, emotion threatening to spill. Do you know how long it's been since someone did that? Malik opened his mouth, but no words came. Daniel cleared his throat, an edge creeping back into his voice. He helped you. I acknowledge that, but I still don't know his intentions. Evelyn's eyes sharpened. His intentions are pure. Daniel stiffened. And how do you know that? He asked carefully. Because, she whispered, a woman my age knows the difference between someone who wants something from her and someone who simply wants her to be safe. A long silence followed. Malik swallowed hard and finally spoke. I don't need anything from her, he said, or from you. Daniel's gaze snapped toward him, sharp and calculating. Everyone needs something. Not me, Malik said, shaking his head. I don't want money. I don't want favors. I don't want trouble. I just didn't want her freezing on a street corner. Evelyn smiled faintly. You have a good heart. Daniel's eyes narrowed, not with hostility, but with confusion. You really expect me to believe you want nothing? I don't expect you to believe anything, Malik replied. But it's the truth. Ben, Daniel's assistant, appeared in the doorway, holding a tablet. He hesitated, glancing at Daniel. Daniel stepped into the hall with him. Malik stayed with Evelyn, who was growing more tired with each breath. I'm sorry if I caused trouble, she whispered. You didn't, Malik murmured. You're safe now. Her lips twitched upward. Do you know, you remind me of someone I once knew, someone good. Malik wished he knew how to respond. But before he could speak, Daniel and Ben returned. Daniel's face was unreadable. Malik, he said, voice low but steady. Step outside with me. There's something we need to discuss. Malik glanced at Evelyn, who gave him a small nod, tired, trusting. Reluctantly, Malik rose and followed Daniel into the hallway. The door closed behind them with a soft click. Daniel inhaled deeply, then spoke. I had my team run a full check on you. Malik's stomach dropped. Daniel continued. Your work history, your address, your background, everything. Malik tensed, fighting the old instinct to run from rooms where questions were traps. I know about the job you lost, Daniel said. I know you took the blame to protect a coworker. I know you care for your sister alone. I know you're behind on rent. Malik stiffened, embarrassed, exposed. Daniel stepped closer, not threatening, but intense. You've had every reason in the world to be angry at life, he said quietly. And yet, all you do is help people. Malik clenched his jaw, saying nothing. Daniel looked down briefly, then raised his gaze again. "People like you," he said slowly, "don't exist in my world." Malik felt the sting in that, but Daniel corrected himself. And maybe that's the problem. A new heaviness settled between them, an uneasy, unexpected respect. Before Malik could speak, Daniel added, "But I need one more thing from you." Malik frowned. "What?" Daniel's voice dropped to a near whisper. "Don't leave my mother." "Not yet." Malik blinked. "I wasn't planning to." Daniel looked relieved for only a fraction of a second, but then he regained the CEO composure he wore like armor. "My mother trusts you. That matters, more than you know." Malik nodded slowly. Then Daniel added, with a tone that carried both humility and warning, "And I intend to figure out why." They returned to the room together. Evelyn, hearing their footsteps, opened her eyes. And Malik felt something shift again. Not a tremor this time, but the slow, undeniable tilt of destiny. Not everything ahead would be easy. But he wasn't walking away. Not now, not ever. Malik didn't know why those words stuck to him as he walked out of Evelyn's hospital room later that night. But they stayed, heavy, certain, echoing through the long corridor like footsteps he couldn't escape. Maybe it was the way she'd held his hand. Maybe it was the way Daniel, for all his wealth and all his power, looked lost in a room where love was the only currency that mattered. Maybe it was because, for the first time in years, someone had looked at him as if he was worth something beyond his failures. Whatever it was, it followed him into the quiet waiting room, where the old heater rattled against the winter wind, and a single vending machine hummed like it was tired too. Malik sank onto a plastic chair and rubbed his hands together for warmth. Outside, Detroit snow pressed against the dark windows, swirling under streetlights in slow, ghostly spirals. He didn't notice Daniel approach until the man's reflection appeared in the glass. "Malik," Daniel said, voice low but firmer than before. "There's more you need to know." Malik turned slightly but didn't stand. "About what?" Daniel sat across from him, elbows on his knees, looking nothing like the high-polished CEO who'd stormed through the hospital hours earlier. Now he just looked like a son trying to understand the pieces he'd dropped somewhere along the road. "My mother trusts very few people," Daniel said, "and even fewer in the state she's been in. Memory lapses, moments of confusion. They've been getting worse." Malik frowned. "She didn't seem confused tonight." "No," Daniel admitted. "Not with you." There was something raw in the way he said it, something that pulled at Malik's chest. "It bothers you," Malik said quietly. Daniel didn't deny it. "It makes me wonder what she sees in you that she's not seeing in me." Malik sighed, leaning back. "Maybe it's not about seeing. Maybe it's about being there." He paused. "Love isn't complicated." Daniel's eyes tightened, not angry, but aching. "In my world," he said, "everything is complicated." The room went still. Daniel shifted, then pulled out a thin file from his coat. "Look, I owe you an explanation. Earlier I told you we ran a full background check." He set the file on the low table next to them. "You need to know what we found." Malik stiffened. His stomach knotted. He'd had background checks done before. Twice. Neither time had ended well. Daniel opened the file. "You grew up around Linwood Street," he said. Single mother. Lost her when you were 15. Malik nodded, his throat tight. Yeah. You bounced between relatives until you aged out of the system. You worked odd jobs, mostly automotive repair. You were good at it, according to your foreman. Malik didn't respond. Daniel continued. You were fired from Alberton Motors 3 years ago. He glanced up. Want to tell me why? Malik swallowed. I broke up a fight. That's not how the report described it. I know. His voice cracked a little, but it's the truth. Daniel's gaze softened just slightly. My investigator tracked down someone who worked there. A woman named Roslyn. She said you stepped in when a coworker was being harassed. You took the heat so the guy wouldn't lose his job. Daniel paused. Even though you barely knew him. Malik looked away, jaw working. Old memories pushed against him. Shouting voices, a supervisor wagging a finger in his face, and the quiet humiliation of carrying your toolboxes out for the last time. Didn't seem right, Malik muttered. Daniel closed the file. You've had every reason to be bitter. Every reason to stop giving. But you kept doing it anyway. Malik stayed silent. The heater rattled again, filling the space between them. You know what the world sees when they look at you? Daniel asked. Malik didn't answer. He already knew. They see statistics, Daniel said quietly. Struggle, poverty, a stereotype. He exhaled slowly. But my mother, she sees something else. Malik stared at the floor. Why are you telling me all this? Because I need you to understand, Daniel said, leaning forward, that my mother doesn't trust people blindly. And if she trusts you, his voice dipped. There's a reason. Malik felt something shift in him. Not pride, not relief, more like recognition. As if the world had been holding him at arm's length for so long, he'd forgotten what it felt like to be pulled closer. Before he could speak, Daniel added, and there's something else. He hesitated, choosing his words carefully. Whatever she whispered to you earlier, she's never said anything like that to me. Malik blinked, startled. Daniel wasn't angry. He wasn't jealous. He was hurting. I'm trying, Daniel said softly. I really am, but I don't know how to fix years of distance in a single night. For the first time, Malik saw the man beneath the CEO, the exhausted son carrying an empire he never asked to inherit, trying to hold on to a mother he'd already begun losing. You start small, Malik said gently. Sit with her. Listen. Be there. That's all she wants. Daniel absorbed that, his jaw tightening, then loosening, like something inside him finally cracked open enough to breathe. Before either man could say more, the door to Evelyn's room opened. A nurse stepped out. She's asking for both of you. Daniel rose quickly. Malik followed, feeling the weight of the file, the weight of Evelyn's trust, the weight of what this moment might mean for all three of them. Inside, Evelyn looked weaker than before, but her eyes warmed the second she saw them. Her fingers reached for the air until Malik took her hand. You came back, she whispered. We're right here, Malik said. Daniel moved closer to the other side of the bed. Evelyn smiled faintly, shifting her gaze between them. My boys, she murmured. Daniel inhaled sharply, not offended, not touched, but stunned. Malik didn't know how to respond, so he just held her hand tighter. She closed her eyes briefly, breathing slow and shallow. Life gets heavy, she told them. But kindness is the only thing that keeps us human. Her voice trembled. The heart monitor beeped softly in the background. Snow pressed against the window like a quiet witness. Don't forget each other, she whispered. Daniel leaned closer. We won't. Malik nodded. Promise. Evelyn's fingers curled weakly around theirs, one hand holding each of them together. And in that small, fragile room, with winter settling deep into the walls, Malik felt the full weight of everything he'd been carrying. All the years of being unseen. All the moments he'd helped without anyone noticing. All the times he'd been blamed for simply existing in the wrong place at the wrong moment. But here, tonight, he wasn't invisible. He mattered. To someone. To both of them. And as Evelyn drifted into a peaceful sleep, her hand still resting in Malik's, Daniel stepped back, watching them with a look that was no longer suspicion, but something closer to understanding. Something closer to respect. And maybe, even if neither of them could name it yet, something that might grow into family. Outside, the snow kept falling. Inside, something else was beginning. Something that would change all their lives. And Malik could feel it rising like dawn just beneath the horizon. For a long moment after Evelyn drifted back to sleep, neither Malik nor Daniel spoke. The quiet in the hospital room wrapped around them like a heavy blanket. Outside, the storm was settling into a gentler fall, the kind that muted the whole world into stillness. Inside, it felt like something was gathering strength, quietly, patiently, waiting for the right moment to break open. Daniel finally stepped toward the window, his hands in his coat pockets, staring out at the night as though it held the answers to questions he hadn't yet learned how to ask. You know, he said, not turning around, I don't remember the last time she held my hand like that. Malik didn't respond. Some wounds were too old for words. Daniel exhaled. She used to sit by the window when I was a kid. I'd come home from school, and she'd ask about my day. Every detail, I never realized how much she was holding on to until... His voice faded. He shrugged. Life changes fast. Malik nodded. It does. A nurse entered briefly to check Evelyn's vitals. Both men stepped aside, watching her with an unspoken protectiveness. When she left, Daniel looked at Malik with a new kind of focus, like he'd made a decision during the silence. We need to talk, he said. Malik felt his stomach tighten. About what? Daniel gestured toward the hallway. Not here. They walked side by side down the quiet corridor, past rooms filled with soft beeping machines and half-open doors where families whispered over sleeping loved ones. The hum of fluorescent lights buzzed gently overhead. Malik noticed how Daniel's stride slowed slightly, as if he wasn't used to moving at a pace that wasn't driven by urgency or deadlines. Finally, they stopped in a small alcove near the end of the wing, a place where the hospital kept spare wheelchairs and folded blankets. Daniel faced him. I'm going to be direct. Always are, Malik replied. Something flickered in Daniel's eyes. Maybe amusement, maybe irritation, but it passed quickly. My mother is the most important person in my life, Daniel began, and tonight made something very clear. She needs people around her who actually care about her. Yeah, Malik said softly. She does. And you, Daniel continued, care. Malik didn't answer. He didn't need to. Daniel drew in a breath. I want to offer you a job. Malik blinked. A job? A real one, Daniel said. Stable salary, benefits, housing assistance, professional training, and not some low-level temp position. I'm talking about a structured path, growth, mentorship, financial security. Malik stared at him, unsure if he'd heard correctly. Why would you? Because I believe in rewarding people who show character, Daniel interrupted. And because my mother, he hesitated. She likes you. She trusts you. That alone tells me you're worth investing in. Malik's chest tightened. Not with joy, yet, but with fear. That quiet, familiar fear of having something offered to him that felt too good, too high above the place life had taught him he belonged. Look, Malik said slowly. I appreciate it, but I don't know anything about corporate jobs. I don't have a degree. I barely made it through high school. We'll train you, Daniel said. From the ground up, I have a program for recruiting internal talent. People with potential, not just credentials. You'd qualify. But why me? Malik asked, shaking his head. There are dozens, hundreds of people who deserve a chance like that. Maybe, Daniel said quietly. But you're the one who showed up for my mother tonight. That counts for something. The words landed with unexpected force. For Malik, life had been a long road of unreturned kindness, helping people who never saw him twice, being blamed for things he didn't do, losing jobs for the sake of others. To hear someone say his kindness counted felt almost unreal. Malik took a step back. I don't want your charity. It's not charity, Daniel insisted. It's an opportunity. Same thing if you ask the wrong person. Daniel's brow tightened. Then ask the right person. Malik met his eyes. I'm scared I'll mess it up. Daniel's expression softened. Everyone messes up. That's not the point. What is the point? That potential matters more than perfection. Malik swallowed. Hard. This man, this billionaire CEO, was offering him a lifeline he'd never dared to imagine. And the more real it became, the more Malik felt the edges of panic closing in. I don't know if I can do this, Malik whispered. I'm not used to people believing in me. Daniel's voice gentled. Then start with this. My mother believes in you. And for me, that's enough. The hallway felt suddenly smaller, like the decision in front of him was taking up all the air. Before Malik could respond, a soft voice floated from behind them. Malik, sweetheart. Both men turned. Evelyn stood at the end of the hall, leaning heavily on her walker, her hospital gown hanging loosely around her small frame. A nurse hurried behind her, flustered, but Evelyn lifted a hand. I needed to tell him something, she said. Daniel rushed to her side. Mother, you should be in bed. I've spent enough time in beds, she said firmly. Let me speak. The nurse stepped back, unsure. Evelyn turned to Malik. Come here, baby. Malik approached, heart pounding. Evelyn took his hand in both of hers. Her skin felt thin as tissue paper, but her grip was steady. You have a gift, she said. A heart people spend their whole lives searching for. And if someone offers you a chance to use that heart in a bigger way, you take it. Malik felt tears sting his eyes. I don't belong in places like that, he whispered. Oh, honey, Evelyn said, shaking her head. You belong anywhere your goodness takes you. Daniel watched, emotion flickering across his face. Evelyn squeezed Malik's hand harder. Don't you dare say no to an open door, not when life finally put one in front of you. Malik's vision blurred. "I don't know if I'm ready," he murmured. "No one is ever ready," Evelyn whispered back. "That's why we leap." For a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. The snow outside, the flickering lights, the quiet hum of machines, even Daniel's rigid posture. Then Malik inhaled slowly. He nodded. "I'll try," he said. "I can't promise I'll be perfect, but I'll try." Daniel extended a hand. Malik stared at it for a long moment, then clasped it. A simple handshake. But it felt like a hinge swinging open, one that could change everything that came after. Evelyn smiled, relief softening her whole face. "Good," she breathed. "Good." The nurse gently turned her walker around. Daniel slipped his arm under hers, guiding her back toward the room. But just before she disappeared through the doorway, Evelyn looked back at Malik and whispered, "Thank you for giving my son a chance to be a better man." Malik stood frozen, heart thudding, watching her go. For the first time in years, hope didn't feel like a stranger. It felt like a beginning. The next days moved in a blur. Quiet, snowy mornings, hospital hallways humming with footsteps, and Malik caught somewhere between disbelief and determination. He still delivered packages in the early hours. Work was work, bills were bills. But every day after his shift, he returned to the hospital. Not because he'd been asked, but because Evelyn smiled each time he walked in. And because Daniel seemed different now. Not warm, not exactly. But something in him had softened, as if a door he'd forgotten existed had cracked open an inch. One morning, after Malik had helped Evelyn adjust her blanket, Daniel stepped inside with 2 coffees in hand. He offered one to Malik without a word. Malik took it, surprised by the small gesture, and Daniel didn't comment on the surprise. They stood on either side of Evelyn's bed, watching her rest. "She looks peaceful," Malik said quietly. "She looks like my mother," Daniel murmured. "It's been a long time since I've seen her this way." Malik didn't respond. Some truths spoke for themselves. Later, when Evelyn drifted off again, Daniel motioned for Malik to step into the hallway. "We start Monday," Daniel said. "I want you at Brooks Technologies headquarters at 7:45. There's paperwork, HR, training schedules. Don't worry. I've arranged all of it." Malik stiffened. "You sure this is a good idea? I've never even been inside a corporate building." "You'll manage," Daniel replied. "I wouldn't offer if I didn't believe that." Malik rubbed the back of his neck. "I don't want special treatment." "And you won't get it," Daniel said. "But you will get a fair chance. That's more than most people get." Malik looked at him, studying the sincerity beneath his polished exterior. "All right," he said softly. "I'll be there." The snow outside thickened, brushing against the windows like soft, white applause. Monday arrived colder than expected, the kind of morning where the air stings your lungs when you breathe. Malik stood at the entrance of the 40-story glass tower downtown, his breath visible in front of him, the collar of his only decent jacket pulled high around his neck. Brooks Technologies looked like another world. People in tailored coats streamed in with coffee cups and badges that blinked green at the scanning gates. The air smelled like espresso and ambition. Malik's heart hammered in his chest. When he stepped through the revolving doors, a woman at the reception desk glanced at his faded jacket, his worn shoes. "Can I help you?" she asked politely, but with distance. I'm here for onboarding," Malik said. Name's Malik Turner. Her eyes flicked down to her screen. After a moment, she straightened. Oh, Mr. Turner. The distance vanished instantly, replaced by something like respect or fear. Mr. Brooks asked me to expect you. Here's your temporary badge. Someone from HR will meet you shortly. Just like that, Malik stepped inside a life he'd never imagined. The elevator ride to the 19th floor felt like floating into unfamiliar air. When the doors opened, he was met by Mia, an HR manager with a warm smile and an efficient pace. "We're excited to have you," she said, as she led him through bright hallways. "Mr. Brooks spoke very highly of you." Malik blinked. "He did?" "He doesn't speak highly of many people," Mia said with a knowing laugh. "Believe me." They went through forms, policies, safety protocols. It was overwhelming. So many acronyms, so many screens, so many expectations. But every time Malik thought he might drown in it, someone stepped in with patience, with clarity, with encouragement. By noon, Malik was assigned to a training cohort, a group of 10 people from varying backgrounds, learning everything from inventory systems to tech-assisted logistics. A few welcomed him with nods and smiles, but not everyone. In the corner, 2 young men whispered to each other, their eyes flicking toward Malik. "That him?" one murmured. "Yeah, Brooks's charity hire," the other muttered. Malik heard every word. He didn't react. Not outwardly. But the old hurt rose again, familiar as an echo, being judged before he even opened his mouth. Later, when he sat alone at a break room table, pretending not to notice the distance others kept, a voice broke through. "Mind if I sit?" Malik looked up. Daniel. He sat across from him, loosening his tie slightly. The room went quiet. Whispers rippled through the air. Malik felt a flush of embarrassment, but Daniel didn't seem to care. "How's the first day?" Daniel asked. "New," Malik said honestly. Daniel chuckled. "That's a polite way of saying overwhelming." "Something like that. You'll get the hang of it." Malik hesitated. "Some people here, they think I'm only here because of you." Daniel's expression shifted. Not anger, but a kind of resolute calm. "They're wrong," he said. "You're here because you earned my respect, and my mother's." Malik lowered his gaze. The words meant more than he could say. "Walk with me," Daniel said. They stepped into the hallway. Through the glass walls, the city stretched out below them. Cars gliding through snow-lined streets, steam rising from manholes, the winter sun hanging low and pale. "I know this world wasn't built with you in mind," Daniel said quietly. "And I know you've lived your whole life being underestimated." He paused. "But I also know strength when I see it. You've had to work twice as hard for half as much, and you still chose kindness." Malik swallowed hard. "That matters to me," Daniel continued. "And it mattered to her. Her. Evelyn." Something in Malik's chest tightened. "How is she today?" Malik asked softly. Daniel's eyes drifted to the window. "Resting. The doctors say she's stable, but things can change fast." Malik nodded, an ache forming low in his stomach. "I want you to keep visiting her," Daniel said. "When you can." "You sure?" "My mother," Daniel's voice dipped, "smiles when she hears your name. That's rare. For her, and for me." Malik didn't know what to say. Gratitude, fear, hope, all tangled together. Then Daniel looked at him with an expression Malik had never seen before. "You're not just an employee," he said. "Not to her, and not to me." Footsteps echoed behind them, co-workers walking by, slowing their pace, pretending not to eavesdrop. Daniel's shoulders squared instinctively, CEO armor sliding back into place. "We'll talk later," he said. But before he walked away, he put a hand briefly, firmly, on Malik's shoulder. It lasted only a second, but it said everything. Weeks passed. Malik grew into his role, learning systems, solving problems, helping coworkers who had once doubted him. Some still avoided him, but others began to soften. They saw his work ethic, his patience, his quiet determination. And in the evenings, he visited Evelyn. Sometimes she told stories. Sometimes she barely spoke. Sometimes she simply wanted Malik to sit beside her and hum softly while the snow tapped against the window. Daniel visited too, more often than before. Awkward at first, then steadier, like a man relearning a language he once knew. One night, when Malik arrived, he found Daniel already seated at her bedside, holding her hand tightly, his other hand trembling in his lap. Malik froze. Daniel looked up, eyes red. "She's getting worse," he whispered. Malik stepped inside, heart sinking. "She asked for you," Daniel added. "Twice." Malik moved to her side, taking her other hand. Her fingers curled around his weakly, like a whisper of the strength she once had. "Hey, Miss Evelyn," he murmured. "I'm here." Her eyelids fluttered. "Good," she breathed. "Good." The machines beeped softly around them. Daniel stood, pacing once, then stopping abruptly. "There's something she wanted me to prepare," he said quietly. "A document. For her final wishes." Malik looked up, startled. Daniel continued, voice shaking despite his attempt to stay composed. "She signed it tonight." "What is it?" Malik asked. Daniel swallowed hard. "A sealed letter," he said, "addressed to her lawyer. And inside it," his voice cracked, "a final request, one she insisted on making." Malik felt the air shift, heavy, unavoidable, as if something monumental had already begun its descent. "What kind of request?" Malik whispered. Daniel looked at him with an expression that held both gratitude and sorrow. "Something," he said softly, "that's going to change everything." The machines continued their steady rhythm. Evelyn's breaths slowed, and the storm outside pressed its quiet face against the glass, waiting, just like the future itself. Waiting for the moment it would finally step through the door. The night Evelyn passed was so still it felt unreal. The snow outside had softened into a glowing white hush, the kind that could make an entire city forget its noise. Inside her room, the world had narrowed to the quiet beep of machines, the faint smell of antiseptic, and the fragile rise and fall of her chest. Malik sat right side, Daniel on her left. No words, no movement. Just three people suspended in a moment neither of them wanted, but all of them understood. Evelyn opened her eyes one last time. Her gaze drifted first to Daniel, her son, her pride, her worry, and her lips trembled into a faint smile. "You grew up so fast," she whispered. "Too fast." Daniel bowed his head, tears slipping onto her blankets. "I'm here, Mother. I'm right here." She touched his cheek with her trembling hand. "I know." Then her eyes turned, searching, softening when they found Malik. "My gentle boy," she murmured. Malik swallowed hard. "Miss Evelyn, you made me feel seen again," she whispered. "You gave me warmth when I had none left. Don't ever doubt what kindness can do." Her breaths grew shallower, each one a little farther apart. "Promise me something," she said faintly. Malik leaned closer. "Anything." "Live," she whispered. "Let the world see what I saw in you." Tears slid silently down his face. Her fingers tightened around his for just a moment. One last pulse of strength, then loosened. The heart monitor flattened into a thin, unbroken line. Daniel's shoulders crumpled forward. Malik bowed his head. The storm outside passed. But inside that hospital room, a different kind of storm settled. The quiet, aching kind that comes when a light goes out, leaving its warmth behind. The funeral came 3 days later on a windless morning in a small Detroit cemetery where bare trees reached thin branches toward a pale winter sky. Only a handful of people attended. Evelyn had outlived most of her friends, but the ones who came carried real grief in their eyes. Malik stood near the back, hands clasped, coat too thin for the weather, but he stayed anyway. He needed to. After the service, Daniel approached him, his breath making soft clouds in the icy air. "She would have wanted you closer," he said. Malik shook his head. "I was exactly where I needed to be." Daniel stared at him for a long moment, something shifting behind his eyes, something between gratitude and regret. Then he said, "Her attorney asked to meet us. There's something we need to hear." Malik frowned. "Both of us?" "Yes," Daniel said. "Both." The attorney's office overlooked the Detroit River, gray and still under the winter sky. The lawyer, a calm man named Whitmore, opened a slim binder and folded his hands neatly on top of it. "Mrs. Brooks prepared several documents before her passing," he said. "Most are straightforward, but 2 items require your presence." Daniel straightened. Malik's heartbeat quickened. Whitmore continued. "First, Mrs. Brooks established a charitable foundation. She named it the Malik Turner Foundation." Malik blinked, stunned. Whitmore went on. "The purpose of the foundation is to support individuals from underserved communities, housing assistance, education, emergency aid. She allocated a substantial sum to launch it." Malik's breath caught. Why would she do that?" "Because she believed your kindness saved her life," Whitmore said gently. "And because you inspired her." Daniel looked sideways at Malik, not with surprise but with something like pride. Whitmore lifted a second envelope. "And there is one more item, a personal letter. This was addressed specifically to Daniel." Daniel took the envelope with trembling fingers. Whitmore nodded and excused himself, leaving them alone in the quiet office. Daniel unfolded the letter. It was handwritten. He took a breath, then read aloud. "My dearest Daniel, if you are reading this, I have gone where your father waits for me. But before I left, there were things I needed you to hear. You built an empire, my son. You climbed so high you forgot the ground beneath your feet. Not out of cruelty, out of survival, out of fear of falling. But life is not meant to be lived alone at the top. Let someone stand beside you. Let someone remind you of who you are." Daniel paused, voice breaking. Malik looked away, giving him the dignity of silence. Daniel continued. I want you to treat Malik as family, not because he saved me, but because he showed you what it means to see someone's humanity before their usefulness, something I fear you lost along the way. Help him rise. Learn from him. Let him teach you kindness the world taught you to forget. This is my last wish. With love, Mother. When Daniel finished, the silence that followed felt heavy with emotion neither man could define. Malik finally said, "You don't have to do any of that. She was just being kind." Daniel folded the letter carefully. "No," he said quietly. "She was being honest." He looked at Malik, straight, unguarded. "We're family now," he said. "Maybe not by blood, but by her choice, and I'm going to honor that." Malik felt something inside him ache, something stitched together from years of being alone, being overlooked, being unseen. He didn't know how to respond, so Daniel continued. "We're going to build that foundation, together. We're going to honor her name, and yours." "My name?" Malik whispered. "Her foundation carries it," Daniel said. "And now so will her legacy." The wind outside the office shook a few thin branches along the riverside path. Inside, Malik stood frozen, the weight of everything settling into him like something both overwhelming and profoundly gentle. A new beginning, not one he earned through wealth or luck, but through kindness. 2 months later, the sign was installed on the front of a renovated community building on the west side of Detroit. Malik Turner Foundation, in honor of Evelyn Brooks. People gathered for the opening. Neighbors, community leaders, families, children, employees from Brooks Technologies. Snow fell lightly, turning the whole block into a quiet winter postcard. Daniel stepped up to the microphone, adjusting it slightly. "This foundation," he said, "exists because of the woman who taught me kindness, and the man who reminded her she was still worth loving." He gestured to Malik. A wave of applause rose. Malik felt his throat tighten. He wasn't used to being looked at like this, with admiration instead of suspicion, respect instead of fear. When it was his turn to speak, he stepped forward, hands shaking slightly. "I didn't save Evelyn," he said slowly. "She saved me." The crowd quieted. "She reminded me that kindness matters even when nobody sees it, even when the world tells you you're invisible. She made me believe a person can be worth something just by caring." He glanced toward the unveiled sign. "And I hope this place reminds others of the same thing." Daniel joined him on stage. Without hesitation, he placed a hand on Malik's shoulder. And just like that, they were exactly what Evelyn wanted them to be. Family. Snow drifted softly around them, like the final blessing of a woman whose kindness hadn't ended at death. It had only changed form, spreading outward, touching lives she'd never meet. Malik looked up at the sky, feeling its quiet weight, its quiet warmth. "Thank you, Miss Evelyn," he whispered. "Somewhere, perhaps in memory, perhaps in faith." She smiled back. If this story touched you, drop a simple 1 in the comments so I know you felt it too. And if you want more heartfelt stories just like this one, make sure you subscribe and turn on the notification bell. I'll be right here, bringing you the next story that might change your day or your heart.